You ever get that text, weeks later, from the girl who disappeared like you never existed? That one notification that shakes your chest for a second, not because you still care, but because of everything it reminds you of. Let's talk about that moment. That exact moment when she reaches out after vanishing. That message isn't innocent. What you do next decides who you are. If you've been ghosted, used, or taken for granted, then suddenly she wants to catch up. This video is for you. Because no one teaches men how to hold the line. No one tells us that not responding is a response. That silence can echo louder than words. And that in that one reply, you might be trading power for a dopamine hit. Stay locked in. This is not just about her. This is about you, your future, your peace, and who you're becoming. Comment, "I choose strength," and stay until the end. This might be the video that changes everything. Number 1, why she really texted. She doesn't text because she wants you back. She texts because she wants herself back in control. What she's reaching for is not your love, but your availability, your emotional energy, your validation. You need to understand this to the bone. When she disappeared, she made a statement. Not just "I'm busy" or "I need space," but "you are not important enough for my presence." And when she returns after weeks, after silence, after making you feel disposable, it's rarely because she regrets her decision. It's because the attention she once got somewhere else ran dry. She's not texting because she suddenly remembered your value. She's texting because someone else forgot hers. And that truth is ugly. It doesn't feed your fantasies of reconciliation or healing, or maybe she's changed. But you didn't come here for comfort. You came here for clarity. When a woman ghosts and returns, it is almost never love. It's logistics. She's recalibrating her options. She's checking the thermostat on your feelings. She wants to know, is he still warm for me? Can I still pull a reaction? Not because she wants to build something real again, but because she wants to know she still can. When you understand this, you stop romanticizing her message. You stop thinking, what does this mean? And start realizing, this means she's still trying to pull strings. And here's where most men fail, not because they reply, but because they reply with hope. Hope that maybe this is her turning point. Hope that she missed them the way they missed her. Hope that the silence was just a phase and not a statement. And that hope is what keeps you trapped. Because every time you respond, every time you re-engage, you are reinforcing to her that she can come and go, that her absence has no cost, that your time and energy are still available for her to dip into. You become emotional real estate, leased out with no rent paid. So when she texts after weeks of silence, what you do next matters more than anything you've done before. If you respond, if you validate, if you even acknowledge her return without consequence, you teach her that your emotions are a playground she can leave and revisit whenever it suits her. And this is why men stay stuck. Not because they don't know better, but because they want to believe better. They want to believe that this woman who walked away, who ghosted, who vanished, somehow grew into someone worth responding to. But time doesn't fix character, only effort does. Did she apologize? Did she take accountability? Did she make restitution? Or did she just slide back in with a casual, "Hey you"? And if that's all it took to get your attention, what does that say about your standards? This is where transformation begins, not in what she says, but in how you interpret it. If her message feels like relief, you're still in pain. If her message feels like opportunity, you're still holding on. But if her message feels like a test, now you're waking up. You have to become the man who sees her message not as a second chance, but as a final exam. She's checking if you've learned anything, if you've grown, if you've stopped romanticizing someone who chose absence over explanation. And the real flex? Not blocking her, not cursing her out, not replying with bitterness. No, The real flex is indifference, genuine, rooted, grounded disinterest. Because when you don't need closure, when you don't need a reply, when you don't need to prove anything, you've won. You've transcended the cycle. You've stopped being the man who hopes for her return and started being the man who respects his own evolution more than her reappearance. That's when the power shifts. That's when you stop reacting and start leading. That's when her text becomes irrelevant, not because you hate her, but because you've finally chosen yourself. You want to win this game? Start by never playing it. When she returns, let her meet a man who no longer needs to explain why he left her unread. Because the truth is, her message was never about you. It was always about control. And the second you see that, the second you feel that in your gut, you'll never be manipulated again. You'll be free, not because she came back, but because you never needed her to. Because the man who sees her text and chooses himself is the man who rewrites his future. And if you're ready to live that truth daily, then the Stoic relationship blueprint is where your transformation begins. This isn't just an ebook, it's a complete mindset shift, forged from the fire of real experience and grounded in unshakable Stoic wisdom. Inside, you'll learn how to navigate modern relationships with clarity, discipline, and power, not just when she comes back, but long before she even thinks of leaving. And the best part, once you have it's yours for life. No subscriptions, no time limits, just timeless truths in your hands forever. The link is in the comments. Grab it now and carry this wisdom with you wherever you go, because peace, clarity, and power aren't just possible, they're one decision away. Number 2, disrespect doesn't deserve replies. There's a moment every man faces that defines the kind of future he'll live in. The moment a woman who once dismissed him, who once discarded his value like it was disposable, suddenly reaches back out like nothing ever happened. It's in that moment where your old self, the one who craved her attention, begged for validation, questioned his own worth in her absence, starts whispering, maybe this is a second chance. And that's the most dangerous lie you'll ever believe. Because disrespect, once given, doesn't vanish with a text. It doesn't dissolve with time. It lingers, it poisons. And if you respond, if you allow that disrespect to be ignored, you're telling yourself and her that it's acceptable. Think about that. Think about how long you waited, how you checked your phone, how you made excuses for her silence. You didn't sleep the same. You lost focus. You questioned yourself in ways no man should, and now she returns with casual words, with no acknowledgement of your pain, with no recognition of her absence, and expects to be welcomed back like a long-lost guest. That's not connection. That's arrogance. That's entitlement. And if you respond, even with kindness, you're telling her, yes, I will allow you to bypass accountability. Yes, I will ignore your lack of respect. Yes, I will betray my own healing for a taste of your attention. But what about you? What about the man you're becoming? The one who finally started seeing his worth, who began standing straighter, speaking clearer, respecting his own time, choosing himself. Are you going to throw him away because she remembered you exist? Because she got bored? Because the guy she left you for didn't work out? No. No man who values himself can afford that compromise. And you may think, what if she's changed? What if she regrets? And to that, I say this: changed behavior without accountability is manipulation. Regret without apology is convenience. If there's no mention of her vanishing, if there's no attempt to make it right, then she's not coming back for love. She's coming back for supply. And if you give it to her, you lose more than your peace. You lose your growth. You lose your standards. You lose the man you were building, because every reply to disrespect is an invitation to be disrespected again. It's an open door that says, my boundaries are flexible, my self-worth is negotiable, and that door, once opened, is hard to close. Because the moment she knows she can leave and return without consequence, she will. Again and again, until you're nothing more than a backup plan in her emotional toolkit. You deserve more, but here's the catch. You don't get more until you demand more. Not with words, with actions, with silence, with non-engagement, with walking away so completely that your absence teaches her the value of your presence. And let's be clear, this isn't about revenge. It's not about making her feel what you felt. It's about protecting your peace. It's about preserving your energy. It's about honoring your growth. Because the man who responds to disrespect is still living in a world where validation from someone else determines his value. But the man who stays grounded, who chooses his own voice over her noise, is the man who wins, not just in relationships, but in life. That man doesn't need her to see his worth. He sees it himself. And that vision, that unshakable knowing, becomes his armor. So next time she texts, next time she reaches out with no apology, no humility, no acknowledgement of what she did, remember who you've become, remember how far you've come, and then do the thing that most men can't, nothing. Not because you're bitter, not because you're playing games, but because you've risen above the level where disrespect is tolerated, where validation is outsourced, where access is unearned. Let her text sit in the void. Let her wonder. Let her feel the absence she once created. And let your silence be the loudest response she never expected. Because in a world where everyone is quick to react, the man who holds the line speaks volumes, and he speaks to himself first. That is power, that is peace, that is self-respect. And no woman, no matter how attractive, no matter how familiar, no matter how tempting, is worth trading that for. Number 3. You owe her nothing. You don't owe her closure, a reply, an explanation, or a polite response, because the moment she vanished without a trace, she forfeited every privilege she once had access to, and I want you to hear that clearly. Not as a motivational phrase, but as a reality that you must internalize to escape the psychological trap that so many men fall into after being ghosted. The modern man is constantly conditioned to think he needs to be nice, to be understanding, to be mature by society's warped definition, but that's manipulation dressed as emotional responsibility. It's the pressure to stay accessible, even to those who violated your dignity. And when you carry that false moral burden, you end up becoming emotionally available to people who would never do the same for you. You spent nights in confusion, mentally spiraling, wondering what you said wrong, what you could have done better, maybe over-apologizing for things that weren't your fault, and she wasn't there to clean that mess. You had to pick yourself back up, and now she returns like she's pressing resume on a paused conversation, as if time didn't pass, as if pain didn't happen, as if your silence was a waiting room and not a war zone. What she's doing is psychological gaslighting at its most subtle, presenting herself like nothing occurred, so that you feel pressured to play along with the fantasy, to smooth over the rupture without holding her accountable. And if you do that, you're not just betraying your standards, you're betraying your self-respect. Because true growth doesn't require performance, it requires principle. And your principle must be this: when someone shows you through action that they can disregard you, your response should not be understanding, it should be withdrawal. Understand this clearly. You owe her nothing for texting you again, not even your attention, not even your curiosity, because when she disappeared, she left you with wounds that you had to heal in silence. She wasn't there to pick up the pieces of your self-worth. She wasn't there to ease the anxiety. She wasn't there to offer any clarity. So now, when she reappears with a casual message, what she's really doing is trying to enter back into your energy without earning it. And if you give it to her, You teach her that she can withdraw emotional investment without consequence and still return as if nothing happened. Imagine giving your heart to someone, watching them walk away with it, and then handing it back to them just because they asked. No accountability, no remorse, just a simple message, and your dignity is gone again. That's not loyalty. That's self-betrayal. And the reason why this moment is crucial is because it's a fork in the road. You either repeat the cycle of chasing unaccountable people, or you break it by standing firm in your boundaries. You don't have to hate her. You don't have to shame her. You just have to remove yourself from the dynamic that made you feel worthless. Because nothing will sabotage your evolution more than entertaining the people who were comfortable watching you suffer. Let her wonder. Let her sit in the silence she once imposed on you. Let her face the echo of her own choices. You're not required to teach her a lesson. You're required to protect your peace. And peace isn't built on second chances for the same disrespect. It's built on knowing your worth so deeply that no text, no apology, no memory can shake it. So don't just move on physically, move on emotionally. Shift your mindset from what could have been to what I won't allow again. That's real power. That's how you turn pain into principle, confusion into clarity, and disrespect into discipline. And the most liberating truth you'll ever accept is this: you don't owe her anything, especially not the version of you she tried to destroy. Number 4. Silence triggers reflection. When you say nothing, you say everything, because silence isn't empty, it's a mirror, and the person who caused the void is forced to look at themselves, often for the first time. And while most men are taught to react, to respond, to resolve, the strongest among them learn that silence is the response that leaves the deepest mark. Because when you don't reply, you strip the situation of drama and force the other person to sit in the discomfort they created. And that's where the real power is. You see, when she reaches out after vanishing, her expectation is simple. She assumes she still has access, that the version of you who once sent double texts, who once over-explained himself, who once sat awake at 2 a.m. analyzing why she stopped replying, is still available. But when you break that pattern by doing nothing, you introduce a disruption so unexpected that it sparks reflection in a way that words never could. Imagine her waiting for a reply that never comes, checking her phone every few hours, realizing that her message, her casual "hey," hasn't pulled the same response it used to. And suddenly, she's confronted with a truth she didn't prepare for. You've changed. Not just moved on, but upgraded, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And she wasn't a part of that journey. That moment, that void you leave by not responding, is more profound than any conversation, because it's the first time she's had to sit with the consequence of her actions, and not many people are built for that level of introspection. And here's the truth nobody wants to say. Most people never reflect until silence forces them to. Words can be debated, dismissed, deflected, but silence lingers, silence whispers, silence confronts. When you don't reply, you're not ghosting her. You're preserving the boundary she shattered. You're refusing to re-enter a space that once left you empty. And yes, there will be a part of you that wants to explain, that wants to say, "You hurt me, and I healed without you." But understand that not everything needs to be spoken, because the man who truly values his growth knows that every message doesn't deserve a response. Every knock on the door doesn't need to be answered. When you stay silent, you're not being weak, you're being wise. You're choosing discipline over chaos, clarity over closure. And in that silence, she begins to remember who you were and who you no longer are. That's the trigger. That's what flips the dynamic. Because now, she's the one questioning, she's the one wondering, and the silence becomes her teacher. Maybe she reflects, maybe she doesn't. but that's no longer your burden to carry. Your job is not to guide her back, it's to guard what you've rebuilt. Your peace, your progress, your power, that can't be compromised for nostalgia. Think about your silence as a locked door, and on the other side is the version of you that used to chase, to overthink, to seek closure. Every time you choose not to respond, that door remains shut, and with each day, you walk further away from the man you used to be and closer to the man you're becoming. That's how legacies are built, not by what you say, but by what you don't entertain. So stay silent, not to punish her, but to protect yourself, because your silence is not revenge, it's reflection for her and for you. And in that silence, the message is loud and clear. I don't need to explain myself to someone who ignored me. I don't need to engage with someone who discarded me. I've grown, I've healed, and I'm not available for recycled access. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. And it's a language only the self-aware can speak. Number 5, her ego is starving. Her ego isn't just empty, it's starving, clawing for anything that reminds her she still matters, and your silence is a famine she can't digest. She doesn't want you. She wants the version of herself that felt adored, pursued, prioritized. Her message isn't a bridge, it's bait. It's a trigger to see if the power dynamic is still hers. Because you have to understand, when she ghosted you, she did it from a place of abundance. She had options. She had validation. She had attention that made her feel like a queen. And in that moment, you were just another admirer in her court. But time is brutal. Time reveals truths, attention hides. That guy she left you for? Maybe he used her. Maybe he bored her. Maybe he saw through her. The compliments dried up. The likes slowed down. The emotional pedestal crumbled. And now, with no audience, she remembers the last man who made her feel seen. You. But don't confuse this hunger for healing. It's not you she wants. It's the feeling you gave her. And if you give it to her again without demand for growth, you become the same emotional vending machine she ghosted before. You become her emotional escape hatch. Understand this. When a woman reaches out after disappearing, she's not looking to rebuild. She's looking to re-feel. And men who confuse ego hunger for emotional connection end up stuck in cycles that shred their self-respect. Because what feels like a second chance is often a repeat performance with the same script and the same ending. She gets validation, you get confusion. She gets closure, you get reopened wounds. And that's the pattern unless you break it. That text she sends is not an apology, it's a test. She wants to know if she still lives rent-free in your head. If one message can undo your progress, if her name alone can shake your peace, and if you respond, especially kindly, you're not being mature, you're being manipulated. Because the truth is, women who respect you don't vanish and reappear. They communicate, they confront, they own their decisions. And women who ghost are not confused. They're calculating, they're preserving options, they're holding on to control. So when she comes back, don't listen to her words, listen to your body. Does it tense? Does your chest tighten? Do your thoughts race? That's not love returning, that's trauma resurfacing. And unless you process it, unless you confront what it did to you, you'll walk back into a fire you just finished healing from. But here's the path forward. Recognize her ego for what it is, a parasite. It doesn't grow on its own, it feeds off attention. The less you give, the louder it gets. And that's your power. Because the man who no longer flinches when she reaches out is the man who's broken the spell. He's no longer her emotional crutch. He's no longer the guy who waits, who wonders, who responds to breadcrumbs. He's the man who's risen from his pain, rebuilt his peace, and now guards it like treasure. He's the man who understands that just because she texts doesn't mean she's changed. Just because she wants attention doesn't mean she deserves access. Just because she's hungry doesn't mean you need to feed her. Because you've been starving too. Starving for clarity, for peace, for self-worth. And now that you've found it, you don't trade it for a taste of the past. You protect it. You preserve it. And you become the man who teaches women not how to reach you, but how to treat you. That's the real win. Not getting her back, but never needing her again. Number 6. You teach her how to treat you. Every reply, every gesture, every second you spend tolerating the intolerable teaches her something. Something about what she can get away with. Something about what you're willing to accept. Something about your value to yourself. And that lesson doesn't just define your relationship with her. It defines every interaction going forward, because how you let someone treat you becomes your brand, your baseline, your silent contract with the world. When a woman disrespects you, ghosts you, lies to you, disappears on you, and then returns like nothing happened, she's waiting to see what you'll allow. If you engage, even casually, even politely, you're saying, "I'm okay with this pattern. I'm okay with being treated as temporary. I'm okay with being an option." And don't kid yourself, women don't forget how you reacted. They remember who stayed available. They remember who forgave without standards. They remember who chose peace over pride. And most importantly, they remember who let them walk away without cost. So when they return, they're not coming back to a blank slate. They're testing the foundation they already cracked. This is why so many men end up back in cycles of emotional whiplash, because they confuse being kind with being weak. They confuse empathy with erasure. They want to take the high road without realizing that road often leads them back to pain. You want to be respected? Then teach her what you won't tolerate. And teaching doesn't mean yelling. It doesn't mean blocking out of anger. It means being consistent with your boundaries. It means treating your peace like a kingdom, not a doormat. And that begins with one question: what do you allow? Because the reality is, no one can treat you worse than you allow. No one can make you feel worthless unless you hand them the power to do so. So if she ghosts and comes back, and you reply, you're sending a signal. This behavior is tolerable. My attention is unconditional. You don't need to grow, you just need to return. That's not love. That's emotional submission. That's how kings become pawns. But when you don't respond, when you hold the line, when you guard your energy like your future depends on it, because it does, you teach her a different lesson. You teach her that your time is sacred, that your standards are real, that your growth is not a temporary reaction, it's a permanent evolution. And that lesson? That's unforgettable, because it's not about punishing her, it's about protecting you. It's about becoming the man who no longer begs to be seen, who no longer needs to be chosen, who no longer tolerates disrespect disguised as love. It's about writing your worth in your actions, not your apologies. And every time you choose silence over reaction, peace over patterns, boundaries over breadcrumbs, you teach the world how to approach you. You teach future relationships what you expect. You teach yourself that your value is not negotiable. This is what separates men who evolve from men who repeat. One teaches his worth, the other chases it. Be the one who teaches. Be the one who sets the tone. Be the one who walks so strongly in his standards that no woman, no matter how tempting, no matter how familiar, no matter how changed, can disrupt the peace he bled to build. That's not just teaching her, that's teaching yourself. Number 7, your response equals your value. Your response is your declaration. It is your loudest, non-verbal signal of who you are, what you believe you deserve, and what you're building. When she reaches out after vanishing, when her name reappears in your inbox like a ghost tapping on glass, every man faces a moment of truth. Do you respond? And what does that response say about the man you've become? Because it's never just a text, it's a mirror. and it reflects not who she is, but who you are in that moment. If you respond with hope, with longing, with curiosity, it means you still believe she holds value over you, that her presence still defines your worth, that somewhere, deep inside, you still crave the validation she once denied you. But if you respond with indifference, or not at all, it means you've reclaimed your self-respect, that you no longer need her to recognize your growth, that her opinion no longer shapes your direction. Because let's be real, how you respond to her comeback defines the trajectory of your own emotional authority. It's a crossroads. You either evolve or you repeat. And every time you choose reaction, every time you open the door to someone who closed it on you without warning, you shrink. Not because you're weak, but because you're betraying your own progress. Your response is a reflection of your internal standards. If you've been healing, growing, journaling, reflecting, training, meditating, why would you throw all of that away for someone who couldn't respect your presence the first time? Why would you trade your transformation for a text that costs her nothing but costs you everything? This is what you must internalize. Real men don't chase closure, they create clarity. Real men don't react, they respond with principle. Real men don't reach backward, they rise forward. And your response, when she comes back, is your moment of truth. Not for her, for you. Because the world is watching, your future self is watching. And the standard you set now is the standard you will carry into every relationship, every deal, every challenge. Do you want to be the man who buckles every time the past knocks? Or the man who builds so deeply into his future that the past becomes irrelevant? You don't owe her anything, but you owe yourself everything: your peace, your growth, your strength. And if one text is all it takes to undo all that, then your foundation is built on sand. But if you can see the message, feel the temptation, and still choose stillness, that's power, that's value, that's unshakable confidence. And the longer you hold that line, the more your life aligns. Because the man who can master his response is the man who can master any area of life: business, health, purpose, relationships. Discipline in response is the blueprint for domination in every arena. So when she texts, choose your response like your future depends on it, because it does. If you've sat in silence waiting for answers that never came, it's time to stop bleeding for someone who cut you and start rebuilding the man you were born to be. The Stoic relationship blueprint isn't just a guide, it's the wake-up call every man wishes he had before he gave himself away. No more overthinking, no more begging, no more chasing. This is your blueprint to unshakable clarity, power, and emotional self-respect in a world designed to keep you weak. It's linked in the comments. Grab it now before comfort robs you of change. If you're ready to break the cycle, comment "I choose myself" like this video and subscribe. Because the next man who sees this might still be chasing a ghost while his purpose is dying in the dark.